West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Fairly surprising, I would say shocking news coming out of ABC News that through questioning of witnesses by the special counsel, by Jack Smith, those witnesses are reporting back that what Jack Smith and his people are questioning them about is that there were 2 rooms at Mar-a-Lago that the FBI did not search when they searched inside the residence for the classified documents. Very, very, very shocking to me that the FBI would not search every room that could possess these documents. But apparently Jack Smith's team questioned the witnesses about a closet and a hidden room inside Trump's bedroom. And that Mar-a-Lago, when they searched it in August of 2022, the FBI didn't open either of those secret compartments. The closet was locked. The FBI knew about it, but apparently they didn't know about the secret compartment. But other witnesses came forward when they were being questioned by Jack Smith and told Smith about it and told them that the FBI, when they came in August of 2022, missed these 2 critical and just crucial areas, right? Where else are you going to hide the biggest, most important secrets? You would think in a locked closet or a secret hiding space. You wouldn't think in the bathroom or the ballroom, where many of these top secret, really important national security information and documents were stored that were marked classified. You wouldn't think they would be strewn about the way the photos have shown for all to see. But I wonder, and clearly Smith wonders, what's in these other rooms, because he was questioning witnesses about it. Obviously, Mar-a-Lago is a big, giant place. Obviously, they didn't search every single place at Mar-a-Lago, right? There's public spaces, there's hotel rooms, and there's all kinds of places they didn't search. But in the area that they had asked permission for a judge, and a judge found that both there was probable cause to believe that a crime occurred and probable cause to believe that evidence of the crime would be located in certain locations in Mar-a-Lago. These are 2 areas within that location, within the designated location that the FBI was not only permitted to search, but was supposed to search to look for all of this stolen and ill-possessed material that he was no longer allowed to have, even if he had clearance and could possess it, and even if Mar-a-Lago was a temporary SCIF, a secure location where he could keep it while he was president. At a certain point, when he was no longer president, and the National Archives informed him that these things were missing and that he wasn't allowed to possess them, at that point, you got to give them back. Not only do you have to give them back, you certainly can't obstruct and move them and hide them in secret places, which is what the allegations are in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. It's not just, he possessed things, right? It's that he unlawfully possessed them, and he intentionally withheld them and lied about it and had others lie about it. So really what ABC News is describing in this really shocking reporting, if it's true, which I assume it is A, that the FBI missed it, B, that Jack Smith knows about it and is questioning about it, and C, that clearly they must suspect there's something in there, or they wouldn't be asking witnesses about it to try to find out. Many of you might be asking or wondering to yourselves, could Jack Smith go back in to Mar-a-Lago with another search warrant to look in those two locations to see what is in there now that they know about it, now that they missed it? So there's a certain concept in the law of search warrants, which is staleness. So if information that you have, it can't be stale. And at a certain point, this was August of 2022, now it's a year and a half later, that information would be stale unless the witnesses he's questioning have seen those rooms or have reason to believe, talk to somebody, that there's contraband in there or evidence of a crime in there, and that it's fresh, that it's something that is still there. And so those are legal standards that he would have to meet if he wanted to go back in and search it again. But the sources that we're talking to ABC basically said that the closet was locked on the day of the search, and it should have been opened and it should have been checked, but that the investigators later learned that Trump had the closet's locks changed. Okay? Talk about consciousness of guilt. He had the locks changed while his attorney, Evan Corcoran, was in Mar-a-Lago's basement looking for these classified documents in storage, where he was told that all such documents would be. But apparently, Trump was trying to conceal these documents from the FBI and Evan Corcoran. And that is what these allegations are about, is that he lied to his own lawyer and that he lied to the FBI, had locks changed, and moved things around so that his lawyer wouldn't find them to turn them over. I don't know. That's probably the best consciousness of guilt evidence I could ever have as a prosecutor. I mean, it is absolutely covering up a crime. And so it's a little shocking to me that the FBI didn't search the locked closet that they knew existed. They didn't know that there was a hidden room. It was apparently behind a dresser, this hidden room, and they didn't know about it. But again, if this was me or you and they were searching our house or our apartment, anyone who's ever had their house searched, they kind of sometimes can make a huge mess. They move furniture around, they look in drawers. You've seen it on TV, right? They're looking through things and they kind of toss the mattresses upside down. And, but of course it's the former president, so they're going to be very careful. They were very deferential. They even apparently wore casual clothes like khakis and not their usual raid jackets when they went and executed the search warrant, so that they could not disrupt very much. So clearly they were once again treating Donald Trump. He claimed, what was the word he used, that he was under siege, or I can't remember what the raid that happened. I can't remember what histrionic dramatic words he used to describe this extremely polite and careful search where they didn't want to upset him in any way, and even dressed a certain way, and so careful that they didn't move any furniture to find this hidden room, and they didn't open up this locked closet, which that's the one that's surprising to me the most. But apparently after the search, several months later, the federal prosecutors literally found out about this by talking to witnesses, and they are asking them about it, and they're reporting back, and that's how people are getting this information, and I assume that's how ABC is getting this information. And it's just one more example of Donald Trump getting away with stuff and being treated differently than others. But this is such a sensitive investigation. This is one, just again, so everybody would know, when you're going to execute a search warrant, there's a lot of meetings that go into planning the execution of a search warrant. We call that a TAC plan, or a tactical plan, where they would have looked at plans of Mar-a-Lago. They would have talked to people who can tell them what are the areas and where things are. They would have photographs, and they would have a plan of which FBI agents are responsible for going to which rooms, who's searching for what. When you have a search warrant and you're allowed to, so for example, if this search warrant said you could find papers, you're only allowed to look places that could hold papers. So if you found a little jar, for example, that was this small and you were like, oh, I'm curious what's in it, you can't open it. That's not within the scope of the warrant, because it's not reasonable that a piece of paper could be in there, for example. And I'm just making this up because I haven't seen the warrant or the affidavit in the warrant, which is what would describe exactly what evidence they were allowed to look for and what they had probable cause for. But essentially, that it is being reported that when the agents reached the locked closet near the front of Trump's residence, they couldn't locate a key for it. And they were told that the space behind the door, an old stairwell turned into a closet with shelves, went nowhere. So they decided not to break it open. Okay, again, anybody else, they break that open, they break open the lock, and they go in there and see what it is. And the FBI didn't do more because they felt like they'd been at Mar-a-Lago long enough. That's what these sources are telling ABC. And of course, the FBI disputes that. I don't know. And look, they had discussions that day about additional areas on the property, and it was determined that their actions met the parameters of the search warrant already, and they decided not to. So look, the FBI is, in my opinion, among the best there is, the best law enforcement there is. They know what they're doing. But this was tricky. You have a former president. You've got Secret Service people there guarding the president. It's just a dicey, tricky situation. You've got bully Donald Trump that is going to come after anyone who does anything remotely stepping in a place that he would think is inappropriate, and they acted accordingly. And so it'll be, if we could ever get this case to trial, if Judge Eileen Cannon would ever allow this case to go to trial and not continue to delay things, we will see that Trump received the subpoena to get the documents, that his attorney, Evan Corcoran, was told to look for responsive documents in boxes that were in a basement storage room. But in days before Corcoran even got to Mar-a-Lago in June of 2022, Ouisghian Zodahs, one of Trump's co-defendants, his valet, acted at Trump's direction and moved more than 30 boxes from that very storage room that Evan Corcoran was going to search, and moved them to Trump's residence. So Evan Corcoran, the attorney, never even saw these boxes, according to the indictment, and he only found 38 classified documents in that storage room and gave them to the FBI. But Trump made sure that many documents that were responsive to the subpoena could not be found. Now we know why, because he was moving them. He had Ouisghian Zodahs move them. And Jack Smith learned that while Evan Corcoran was in the storage room, while he's in the storage room looking for these documents, Trump asked a different Mar-a-Lago employee to change that lock on the closet. For years, the lock on the closet was managed by the Secret Service. But on June 2nd, 2022, Trump had it changed and wanted the key. If that is not evidence of obstruction of justice, I mean, that is the smoking gun, That is outrageous, that behavior. And the locked closet, they didn't go in, and Trump, I guess, is lucky, because something must have been in there that was so important that he changed the lock. The FBI gave them a pass. They didn't know about the hidden secret room that was behind the dresser or whatever. But that sometimes happens when you might miss secret hiding places. But the fact that they didn't go into that locked closet is turning out to be a critical mistake on their part, and could have had even more damaging evidence that could have been used at trial. But as I said, this consciousness of guilt evidence is just absolutely stunning and crushing. And if this case ever goes to trial, he's going to prison.
It is Friday, the 2nd of February of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our little Yorkie, is the door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Oh my. Well, we've had a bit of a busy morning, and then in the midst of the busy morning, I'm not Netroots Radio, fortunately, but I hope I'm not putting us in jeopardy. But regardless, I was locked out of Twitter once again for either the algorithm or somebody's getting pissed off at me. I like to think that it's all about me. But regardless, more than likely, the algorithm is now going months and months back. They're going to have to go years for every time I use the term punch these Nazis, punch the Nazis. So rather than appeal, I remove the content like I did the other day. Now, they didn't lock me out for 11 hours or however long it was last time. For now, I'm back on. We'll see how long that lasts. But if Twitter is going to start removing people because they said punch the Nazis, then Uncle Sam's got to be removed because that's where I got it from, pal. You would expect Nazis to be concerned about being punched, wouldn't you? Yeah. And when we say punch the Nazis, we're not encouraging anybody to go up and punch a Nazi. Give me a break. But you can punch them where it hurts, like in the wallet. Okay. They can go ahead and have all of this Pepe BS about, killing the Jews. Just blatant BS. And when you say, hey, I'm going to punch you, Nazi. Oh, we got to, your hate speech. You're encouraging violence. Really? Typical Nazi bullshit, isn't it? Yes, it is. Well, with that stated, we are going to, and since we had such a long introduction there, about, old Donnie Trump obstructing justice and trying to get away with what were the secret documents in that hidden room and behind that door of that locked closet to nowhere. I don't understand, Now we know that there were FBI agents who don't want to investigate Donald Trump because I guess they're part of this Opus Dei bullshit. Oh, that's another reason. That was in response to an Opus Dei BS that I said, you have to punch these Nazis. Oh. Well, anyway. These guys, I guess, think they know better than us. Our country is going to hell because of pluralism, diversity. And so, they were on a crusade. They're the army of God, which is Hezbollah in Arabic, by the way, just so we're clear. So you have a group of fellas who conspired to take down Hillary. And they're still there. And now they're protecting Trump. So you would expect a former stairwell has been turned into a closet not to go anywhere. It's a closet. It's locked. What's in it? God. You go through decades and decades of the TV show Law and Order. I know it's not reality, but it's reality enough. Jeez, no wonder they want to keep kids out of the humanities. They might figure things out. Oh, okay, that closet door's locked. A closet to nowhere. Yeah, you would expect a closet to go nowhere. It's a closet. What's there? It's got shelves. What's on the shelves? Personal items. Yeah. And now, during a Middle East crisis, our troops are getting killed. They're being attacked daily. How much help did our enemies get from that closet? That's what I'd like to know. Okay, so all of that aside, since we had that long introduction there, which I think really broke it down quite well, and David did too at his show, what is on the rest of the menu here as we begin in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast, Cookbook, and Speakeasy? The Oregon Supreme Court ruled that 8 Republican lawmakers will be blocked, and there's only 11 in the whole state house. I love that. From running for re-election after refusing to attend Senate floor sessions for 6 weeks last year. We, the voters, passed an initiative to make sure these guys show up for work and stop running out of state and preventing a quorum from being established. Place your vote. If you don't get it, you don't get it. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can't run for office now because you violated this law. There you go. A year after scaring away Hispanic Americans and immigrants from the state, the Florida House passed a bill to loosen child labor laws. They're having trouble filling jobs when there was 365,000 jobs in this last quarter. Not in Florida because everybody's running. And I don't blame them. And once a self-proclaimed leader in criminal justice reform, Georgia is sliding a little further towards its old lock 'em up ways. Well, some people might say they didn't have to slide far. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the 2 key farmers' unions have suspended their nationwide protests after the French government offered new measures. Finally. And tens of thousands rallied across Slovakia against the government's plan to close the special prosecutor's office. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Going to forego the usuals once again at this usual juncture in the show and tuck right into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. And it is out of Oregon Public Broadcasting by Dirk Vanderhart, who is actually from Oregon Public Broadcasting. 8 Republican lawmakers in the Oregon Senate will be blocked from running for re-election after refusing to attend Senate floor sessions for 6 weeks last year. The Oregon Supreme Court ruled yesterday, Thursday, in a unanimous opinion that could have reverberations for the upcoming legislative session. The court sided with Secretary of State LaVon Griffin-Valade's interpretation of Measure 113, the 2022 ballot measure that voters approved with an eye toward ending legislative walkouts. In doing so, the court embraced a reading of the law that even the state acknowledged is difficult to square with its actual language, in effect ruling that the clear intent of voters in passing the measure was more important than the plain wording inserted into the state constitution. While petitioners' interpretation of the text may be more grammatical reading, the court wrote, the text is capable of supporting the Secretary's interpretation. The ruling was hailed by Griffin-Valade and by the public sector unions that pushed the anti-walkout law in the first place. Andrea Kennedy Smith, former vice president of Service Employees International Union Local 503, said in a statement the ruling upholds the intent of Oregon voters. Politicians need to do their jobs or lose their jobs. But the result drew immediate outcry from Republicans, I'm shocked, who suggested the court's liberal leanings had trumped a legally sound outcome. They are such sore losers. And I'm not even going to go through their whine fest. Measure 113 was an attempt by unions and their allies to create stiff consequences for lawmakers who engage in walkouts, which deny a legislative chamber the two-thirds quorum of members present required to conduct business. While both parties have used the strategy, the minority Republicans have been using walkouts increasingly since 2019. The law got its first test not long after voters passed it in November of 2022, raising objections over a raft of Democratic proposals. 10 Senate Republicans walked away from the 2023 session for more than 40 days, returning only after they'd secured concessions. 8 of those lawmakers have signaled they plan to run for re-election earlier this year or in 2026. Creating a question of how precisely the measure works. As sold to voters, Measure 113 blocked lawmakers from running for another term if they acquired 10 or more unexcused absences in a legislative session. But while explanatory statements, ballot language, and news articles depicted those consequences as immediate, the actual language of the law was far more muddled. It said that lawmakers who hit the 10-day absence threshold could not hold office for the term following the election after the member's current term is completed. Since elections are held prior to the end of a legislative term, not after, Republicans zeroed in on the wording, because that's what they do, contending the law clearly grants them another term before being blocked from running. Well, there's history involved here also, Mr. Republican. After Griffin Volade announced in August she would bar walkout participants from seeking re-election this year, 5 Republican senators filed suit. In their suit, and during oral arguments, the Republican lawmakers argued that the sloppy language had slipped through unnoticed, partly because the measure got no serious opposition. Nevertheless, they said, the plain reading of the law is clear. The Oregon Department of Justice, defending Griffin Volade, acknowledged the wording was not ideal, but the state put forward a novel reading of the language. I like how this is being reported. Very interesting. Back to the article here. It was suggesting the justices should insert imaginary commas to indicate Republicans could not hold office for the term, comma, following the election, comma, after the member's current term is completed. This awkward reading, the state said, would ensure that lawmakers be blocked from seeking re-election immediately, and was the only way to square the law with how voters intended it to play out. I got to tell you, I voted for the law because it was immediate. You don't get to run for election. Not, you get to run for the next one and then not the one after. This is what these guys are talking about. The text here can be read, albeit in a redundant way, as effectuating voter intent. Oregon DOJ attorney Dustin Buehler told justices during the oral arguments, "It's clunky, it's inelegant, but this is also a voter-approved initiative." Brendan Farrington of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A year after Florida enacted a new law making it more difficult for employers to hire immigrants in the country illegally, the House passed a bill yesterday, Thursday, to let 16 and 17-year-olds work longer and later hours, also with no breaks. Supporters said teenagers and their parents know how to best manage their time and activities, and lifting employment restrictions will help them build careers and earn money, especially in the current labor shortage. You mean the labor shortage created because you guys scared away your labor? Because of racist means? Talk about DEI. Opponents said the changes would make it easier for employers to exploit children, and longer hours could negatively affect schoolwork. And the supporters said, exactly. The bill would remove restrictions prohibiting 16 and 17-year-olds from working more than 8 hours when they have classes the next day, and from working for more than 30 hours a week when school is in session. The House passed it on an 80-35 vote. Get those kids to work. Democrats opposing the bill argued the current law allows students plenty of time to work and attend school. Representative Anna Escamani questioned whether the measure was being proposed because the state's immigrant employment restrictions are making it more difficult to fill some jobs. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Georgia, once a self-proclaimed leader in criminal justice reform, is sliding a little further towards its old lock-em-up ways. State senators voted 30-17 yesterday, Thursday, to require cash bail for 30 additional crimes, including 18 that are always or often misdemeanors, leaving Senate Bill 63 only one House vote from passage. The measure also seeks to limit charitable bail funds or even individuals from bailing multiple people out of jail, reserving that ability only to those who meet legal requirements to be bail bond companies. The move could strand poor defendants in jail when accused of crimes for which they're unlikely ever to go to prison. It could also aggravate overcrowding in Georgia's county lockups. It erodes changes that passed nearly unanimously in 2018 under Republican Governor Nathan Deal that allowed judges to release most people accused of misdemeanors without bail. It's part of a push by Republicans nationwide to increase reliance on cash bail, even as some Democratic-led jurisdictions end cash bail entirely or dramatically restrict its use. That split was exemplified last year when a court upheld Illinois' plan to abolish cash bail, while voters in Wisconsin approved an amendment to the Constitution letting judges consider someone's past convictions for violent crimes before setting bail. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, dark fun. Driving home the night the nominees were announced, I heard a pundit say, there are Oscar-nominated films, and then there's Poor Things. It's a safe bet you've never seen anything like Yorgos Lanthimos' adaptation of Alistair Gray's 1992 novel. This one might be the most bizarre coming-of-age/road trip adventure ever. Set in an alternative Victorian London full of bizarre what-if technology and biology, a design known as steampunk, our protagonist is Emma Stone's character, Bella Baxter, who is, avoiding spoilers here, what we'll call a composited being, created by a Frankenstein-like Dr. Godwin Baxter, known as God for short, really, who's brought off by William Dafoe. Okay, slight spoiler, Bella has the brain of a child, and the film is basically her growing up, physically, intellectually, and sexually, especially after escaping from God and his assistant and her betrothed Max to go on a steamship cruise with God's debauched lawyer Duncan, Mark Ruffalo. On that cruise, she's confronted on every level imaginable, and watching her development is as fascinating as it is funny. In an amazing acting job, Stone captures Bella from untoilet-trained woman-child to sharp-witted intellectual discussing human perfectibility. The movie's shot in black and white, with some scenes in color, lots of bizarre angles and the use of wide-angle lenses, seemingly unnecessarily until you know the code. Poor Things ventures into fraught areas of feminism and female empowerment, where those searching for hypocrisy and outrage seem never to be at a loss. Those so inclined should remember that part of humor is satire and even cynicism. Fans of Terry Gilliam and Wes Anderson will get this one. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Last winter, you might have seen the headlines about rising hospitalizations from respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV. Healthcare providers now have tools to help prevent lower respiratory tract disease caused by RSV in adults 60 years and older. This fall and winter is the first respiratory season when RSV vaccinations will be available in the United States to help protect against RSV for older adults. Scientific American Custom Media recently sat down with Dr. Temi Folaranmi, Vice President and Head, U.S. Medical and Clinical Affairs, Vaccines at GSK, in this GSK-sponsored segment to learn more about RSV, the immune system, and vaccinations. Well, Dr. Folaranmi, it's such a pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
So before we dig into the details of this conversation, I'm really curious about you and your background. Specifically, you've spent your whole career combating diseases and viruses. You've worked on meningitis, polio, HIV, both in Nigeria and in the U.S. So what sparked this interest for you?
I trained as a physician, and I also have postgraduate training in public health and public policy. This training is important for my career because I think the intersection between clinical practice, public health, and public policy, and the broader scientific community is so important that our public health policy have strong foundation in science. And I've spent a lot of my career as helping to inform public health policies and programs based on sound research and data. I think for me, growing up in a developing country like Nigeria, I see various cases of infectious disease. I developed that passion very quickly that it's an area that I want to contribute to, focusing on disease prevention as well as treatment. And I feel that one area that I can really make an impact is in that public health space, where we can use data to make population-level decisions that will have impact on the life of a broader group of people versus the individual patient treatment that I do on a daily basis.
Tell me a little more about how you went from someone seeing that in your own country to being motivated to do this kind of work.
I figured that for me to be able to do this kind of work, I need to have the right set of training. So having completed my medical degree in Nigeria, I came to the US to pursue a master's degree in public health at Harvard University. And upon completion of that training, it became very apparent to me that people who make public health policies actually more politician and not the expert. And so I figured I needed to have a training that allowed me to speak the language that these people speak. And that led me to take a training in public policy so that I can use my scientific knowledge to inform good conversations with policymakers who make public health decisions.
That's your background. The topic of today's conversation is RSV. For people who don't know what RSV is, could you just define it for me?
Absolutely. So RSV, or many of RSV, is the respiratory syncytial virus. It's a common contagious respiratory virus that usually causes mild symptoms. However, older adults are more likely to have severe outcomes from the virus because their immune system typically weakens as we age. Each year, approximately 177,000 adults aged 65 and older are hospitalized in the US due to RSV, and an estimated 14,000 of these cases result in death. So for even adults aged 60 and older, some data suggests that there is even increased risk of severe RSV infection that could lead to hospitalization as well. So what you see here is while RSV may present as mild cold symptoms for certain individuals, it could present severe outcomes for certain individuals.
What happens to the body as it ages that makes it more vulnerable?
That's a good question. So as we get older, our immune system tends to weaken over time, and that puts us at higher risk of certain diseases. And because it's difficult for our body to put on defenses against this disease, it makes us more vulnerable to these infections. And on top of that, if you now have conditions that makes you even more vulnerable, such as obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, chronic heart failure, the risk of severe outcome from RSV could be worse. So what RSV does is that even in elderly individuals, it could present as common cold, but in some cases, it could be severe. It could present as cold in certain individuals. It could present as even worse outcomes.
So some people make the mistake of thinking, I'm fine, but it's actually more serious than that if they have underlying conditions.
Yes, but what's interesting is that for the most part, RSV is not even diagnosed because people think it's common cold. They just want to be in bed and just wait it through. But in certain situations, it could be worse.
Can you give me a brief overview of what got us to this point when it comes to preventing RSV?
So RSV vaccines have evaded scientists for over 60 years. Scientists have been searching for ways to get ahead of RSV as early as 1955, when a virus was discovered in chimpanzees suffering from respiratory symptoms. Now we know that several factors have made tackling RSV challenging. These include multiple mechanisms that RSV uses to evade the innate immunity. In addition to that, the lack of durable protective immunity induced by natural infection, meaning that even those who have the infection from RSV, they don't get any protection from that. And the last piece is also the decline in the immune system as we age. So when you compare RSV to other viruses, the virus is particularly smart at evading our immune system because it lives primarily outside of the body on the surface of our breathing passages. It stays protected from many of the typical immune responses that we have. But thanks to all these recent advances, now we know the scientific community has fresh insight into the protein that helps us develop immunity against RSV. That specific protein is called the surface fusion glycoprotein F. That protein is involved in the initial phases of infection. And so if we can target that protein, it can help us tailor our approach to how to meet the needs of people who are particularly at risk.
So what is your message to people who are 60 and older or to the people who treat them?
Older adults, including those with certain underlying medical conditions, need to know their risk factors for RSV and should speak with a healthcare provider if they develop cold-like symptoms, and also discuss their risk for severe RSV illness. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends that adults 60 years of age and older speak to a healthcare provider about RSV and vaccination. I recommend that healthcare providers make themselves familiar with this recommendation from the CDC. Healthcare providers and patients should also discuss other appropriate vaccinations during the respiratory illness season. In terms of access, patients with Medicare Part D We pay no out-of-pocket expenses for CDC-recommended vaccines. RSV vaccination may also be covered for commercially insured patients at no cost when administered in-network. So patients should ask a healthcare provider about coverage for RSV vaccination.
Great. Well, Dr. Temi Folaranmi, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Dr. Temi Folaranmi is the Vice President and Head of U.S. Medical and Clinical Affairs Vaccines at GSK. GSK is a global biopharma company with a purpose to unite science, technology, and talent to get ahead of disease together. This podcast was produced by Scientific American Custom Media and made possible through the support of GSK.
We're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. Georgia is the only state which conducts runoffs for both general and primary elections when no candidate receives a 50% majority. But runoff elections are time-consuming, have low turnout, and can cost millions of dollars to run. Ranked choice voting, also known as instant runoff, could solve it, but the Georgia Senate just voted to ban it. The runoff in the 2022 U.S. Senate election between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker cost Georgia an estimated $75 million to run. On average, turnout in Georgia runoffs is 30% lower than the general election. State and party officials have discussed doing away with runoffs entirely and allowing a winner with less than a 50% majority. Just last month, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger implored the legislature to end runoffs, but didn't offer alternatives. Maine and Alaska use instant runoff RCV statewide, and other states are considering it for its wider choice of candidates and lower cost. Even Georgia allows it for its military and overseas voters because its 4-week runoff cycle doesn't allow time to return a ballot. But on January 25th, the Georgia Senate voted to ban its use, citing voter confusion and the extra time required. 80% of Alaskans found it easy to use. The RCV ban has yet to pass the Georgia House. We have an explainer on how RCV works at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1848. That was the day the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed. It signaled the end of the Mexican-American War. The war began in May of 1846 when the United States sought to expand its annexation of Texas. It immediately became a partisan issue between pro- and anti-slavery forces. Southern Democrats and slave plantation owners favored war with Mexico. They hoped to undercut rising Northern industrial power with the expansion of slave territory. Whigs and Northern abolitionists opposed the war for the same reason. After almost 2 years of fighting, the war ended. In exchange for $15 million, the United States gained 525,000 square miles of land. This territory included all or parts of Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. Mexico gave up all claims to Texas, and the Rio Grande was established as the border. The initial treaty promised protection of land, civil rights, and full citizenship for those Mexicans who stayed on the newly acquired territory. These guarantees were deleted from the final ratification. Expansionist aims reignited debates about the extension of slavery. The newly formed Free Soil Party gained traction with its campaign to limit, localize, and discourage slavery. Their banner read, "Free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men." Antagonisms were briefly tempered with the Compromise of 1850. This allowed California to be admitted as a free state. It also prevented the outlawing of slavery in the new territories. The slave trade was banned in the District of Columbia, but a new and more stringent fugitive slave law was enacted. Debates regarding expansion of slavery would rage on throughout the 1850s, culminating in the Civil War.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs only around 48 to 49. Rain showers throughout the day with a peak of sunshine maybe in the afternoon hours. Winds will be out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, expecting a little bit less than a quarter inch of rain. Partly cloudy skies tonight with lows near 35. Winds light and variable. And then a few passing clouds tomorrow, otherwise generally sunny with highs in the low 50s. Winds light and variable. Rain picking up some more on Sunday, and cooler temperatures throughout the week, day and night, with quite a bit of rain. Looks like pollen is still rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 14 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.76 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 99%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 55 degrees and fair. Paris is 49 degrees and mostly cloudy. Rome is 58 and sunny. Bagram is 33 degrees and cloudy. Kyiv is 35 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 68 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 41 and mostly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 58 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and mostly cloudy with a small craft advisory. Chicago, Illinois is 38 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 41 degrees Fahrenheit with light rain. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Sylvie Corbet at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. France's two major farmers' unions announced they would lift country-wide blockades shortly after the Prime Minister introduced new measures aimed at protecting their livelihoods that they described as tangible progress. However, farmer activists who have snarled traffic along major highways around Paris said they would stay put at least another day to see the government commitments in writing, and both unions said they would closely monitor any government implementation. Thousands of French farmers have been demonstrating for a couple of weeks across the country in protests over low earnings, heavy regulation, like don't use pesticides, don't throw your cow shit in the little stream that goes into the Seine, those kinds of regulations. And also what the farmers call unfair competition from abroad. That's the magic of the market, Similar protests have also extended across Europe, including at the European Union headquarters in Brussels. Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, whose earlier promises to address farmers' issues had failed to quell the French protests, announced a new set of measures yesterday, Thursday. They included tens of millions of euros in aid, tax breaks, and a promise not to ban pesticides in France that are allowed elsewhere in Europe, which French farmers say leads to unfair competition. Attal also said France would immediately ban imports from outside the EU that use a pesticide banned in the bloc.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Staff at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Mass street protests intensified across Slovakia against a plan by populist Prime Minister Robert Fico to amend the country's penal code and eliminate the office of the special prosecutor that deals with major crime and corruption. Tens of thousands were rallying as the protest spread to 31 cities and towns across the country, up from just 24 last week. Rallies also took place abroad where Slovaks live, such as the Czech Republic, Poland, France, Norway, Ireland, Belgium, and Luxembourg. The plan approved by Fico's coalition government includes abolishing the special prosecutor's office, which handles crimes such as graft, organized crime, and extremism. Those cases would be taken over by prosecutors in regional offices which have not handled such cases for over 20 years. The plan changes also include a reduction in punishments for corruption and some other crimes, including the possibility of suspended sentences and a significant shortening of the statute of limitations. Parliament is currently debating the draft, but the ruling coalition has approved a fast-track parliamentary procedure to approve the changes and limit time for discussion. The vote may come as early as next week. President Zuzana Kapitova sharply criticized the proposed changes and said she is willing to challenge the legislation before the Constitutional Court. Some European Union institutions have questioned the Slovak proposals. Fico returned to power for the fourth time after his scandal-tainted leftist party won the September 30th parliamentary elections on a pro-Russia and an anti-American platform. A number of people linked to Fickel's party, the scandal-tainted leftist smear or direction, face prosecution in corruption scandals. Fickel's critics worry his return could lead Slovakia to abandon its pro-Western course and instead follow the direction similar to that of Hungary under Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Oh my. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. And you do know that Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appétit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.